Welcome to our Frankly Speaking webinar series, where we hope to provide further insights into doing business in our ever fast changing world. Today's topic is selling skills in the new post-COVID-19 world, a skill which I'm sure you will agree is vital for the sustainability, if not survival, of our businesses going forward. So my name is Anthony van der Hoek, and I'm a partner at BDO Business Services and Advisory. BDO has been providing professional services and advice to our clients for over 60 years, and we are the fastest growing professional service firm and have been so for the last 10 years. We offer audit, tax, advisory services to a range of clients, ranging from private individuals through to the public sector and JSE listed companies. We try hard to build lasting relationships with our clients because we understand your needs and challenges. So presenting this webinar is important to us, as we know that selling skills in the new world is vital to the success of your business. At BDO Business Services and Advisory, we offer a 360-degree range of business solutions, from outsourcing of our clients' non-core activities such as accounting, reporting, administration, tax, and other compliance matters that are relevant to our clients' business. So today our guest speaker is Greg Castle. Greg is an internationally certified professional business and executive coach with more than 26 years experience as an entrepreneur, business owner, corporate company director, and has a track record of successful business growth and strategic change management through employing strong market orientation across numerous industries. Greg is also the founder of a strategic marketing consultancy called Talkle, and a partner of a business coaching company, Action Coach. So the format of today's webinar is that Greg will share his insights with us, which will take approximately 45 minutes, after which there'll be time to take some questions. So please, you're very welcome to post questions during the webinar on the Q&A, which we will then answer at the end. And also please look out for a short survey at the end, which I would ask that you respond to. So I'm now going to hand over to Greg.
We seem to have lost Greg there. Just give us a minute until we get him back on the call. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, but I suddenly got tossed off. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Good old technology. It's, of course, Murphy's Law, 2 seconds before we're due to go live and something happens with Wi-Fi. But I'd just like to welcome you all to this webinar today, a bit of a masterclass on sales. And thanks to BDO for inviting me to run this series. And to Justine for operating the slides. This is all being remotely operated from about 1,000 kilometers apart. So seamless technology. Obviously, it wasn't a good start, but hopefully it all picks up from here. Just very briefly, I think perhaps as a bit of background of my 27 or so years of business, I've been involved in leading or managing marketing and sales teams throughout that period. Half of that time has been in corporate environment in the first half, and the second half in developing my own businesses. And through that and subsequently the last 10 years of coaching many different businesses, I've really picked up that we really still operate in a very antiquated sales environment. And it's not just in South Africa, it's actually a global phenomenon. And I think to a large degree, some of that has to do with the fact that potentially we're still a lot of companies are being headed up still by baby boomers who come out of that sort of era of the sort of 60s and 70s where sales was a predominant sort of feature in business back in those days. Things have changed dramatically with the advent of marketing and how that orientation has changed the way that businesses look. And I think what COVID-19 or Corona has really done is that it's really just brought this to the fore. It's not something that's new, but it has actually brought a sense of urgency to the need to change the way that we sell. And I'm going to talk about that today. And really, if you haven't already started to adapt the way that you sell your organization to prospects, now's the time to start. I wouldn't delay. Things have changed and things are now changing rather dramatically. So that landscape is different, and the landscape is different for many reasons. You know, if we just look at the political and economic upheavals taking place that have taken place around the world, sure, we've had our own dramas with, you know, Jacob Zuma's shocking 10-year tenure of, you know, leading this country and the economic implications of that. But we can't, you know, purely lay blame at the feet of the ANC for that. There's a lot of global changes that have started to happen. If you just look at having Trump in power in the United States, Brexit in the UK, a lot of unrest in parts of Europe, and places like Hong Kong for the first time. You know, people start to become restless when their economic situation is not positive. And we're coming out of a particularly negative one, which makes this Corona issue a particular challenge to us. So attitudes have changed. You know, people are now looking at things from a different perspective. They've got different priorities. They're a bit jaundiced and skeptical about sales and marketing information that they pick up in the media. A little bit more distrusting because they're more intelligent and they actually question things like never before. And there's also a cash flow shortage. In many instances, people have used up their cash flow in order to survive this period of shutdown, etc. And in many cases, this is going to continue for months, if not for the next year or two. And so people are looking at sales and how people approach them very differently. And there's now this need to change the way that we market and to shift our messaging accordingly in the marketing messages, but then also look at how do we change the marketing message and the way we market to people and attract them to our organization. How do we change and pivot the sales team accordingly so that the two are actually running in parallel with one another? And of course, sales, I know a lot of salespeople hate this when I say it, but sales has to take the lead from marketing. And that really is a truly marketing-oriented organization. And I'm going to talk more about why that is so important just now. And the emphasis now more than ever before is bringing things like empathy, sensitivity, and compassion to the discussion that we have with our clients. So if we can go on to the next slide. So what it really requires here is a change of mindset, and the change of mindset really has to begin with you, the CEO, the MD, the owner of the business, the senior management of the business. And your teams, your sales teams need to develop a completely different mindset. And so part of your responsibility now as leaders is to prepare them for that change. And I'm going to talk more about what that change is going to require. But more than ever before, it's going to require a hell of a lot more coaching, mentoring, and training and development than perhaps you've done in the past, and very different type of training and coaching and development in order to have a very different approach in the market. You know, simple things, of course, like, you know, the fact that they haven't used things like writing skills or phone skills, and particularly in the past. Now, with a degree of social distancing, And that's going to continue no matter what for some years to come, and not because of Corona. It's just because a lot of people are going to be operating somewhat remotely to the way that they did before. They're not going to see the need to sit face to face with people and have meetings physically in front of people like before. So a lot of it's going to go to digital, phone, and writing communication. But importantly here, to refocus and develop very clearly what it is that makes your offering specifically unique. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about offering, and I use that very lightly because people don't like to be sold to. They don't like to buy what you have. They only want to buy something that they see answers a need or a want. In other words, a solution. And so I don't talk about unique selling propositions in the usual sense of USP. I talk about unique solutions proposition. And you're going to hear that word come up a lot in the next in the next few minutes. So the emphasis here is on marketing orientation, and I'll give you some examples of that marketing orientation now. So here you can see 4 pillars, and there's 4 pillars of business. You've got the starting point, you've got the focus, you've got the means, which is basically the operational side of the business, the things that make things happen, and ultimately the end is the end game that you're wanting to try and get to. So the first way of looking at this, if we could just wait for that build to come up. There's one more that Justine is the product and services based selling orientation. This is the typical way that organizations operate. They have products and services that they've developed over time, possibly with a great idea way back when. And so the starting point here is the company. This is who we are. Our focus then becomes our products and our services, and we're going to make those products and services as perfect and as great as we possibly can. And our means then, our operational approach is through selling, and promoting. And the end game is that our profits, hopefully, if there are profits, will come through sales volume. So we're going to rely on sales volume here. And ultimately, what we're talking about here is very easy for somebody to copy this type of model. So if somebody has a way of copying your products or your services, it means ultimately you're going to end up in a price war situation, and those profits are going to come down very quickly. On the solutions-based marketing orientation, however, the starting point is the target. Who is it that we want to do business with? And you could call it a niche if it's narrow enough, but ultimately you've almost got to describe a person or personality or a specific business type in detail that would fall into that sort of bell curve of your perfect type of client base that you want to target. And then your focus needs to become ongoing customer and stakeholder needs. And what I mean by that is you need to constantly understand what it is that they need and want and how those are evolving over time. And even from 3 months ago, prior to COVID-19, to the point that we're at now, those needs and wants for most people as individuals and for organizations will have changed quite dramatically. And that's how quickly these things can change. So then your means becomes coordinated marketing and sales. And coordinated is really important, and I'll talk more to that just now. And the end point becomes your profit through customer and stakeholder satisfaction. And what this is really showing you very simply is that the bottom line, the red arrow, is the sustainable model. This is the one that if you are constantly focused on your customers' evolving needs and wants, you're going to constantly be able to adapt accordingly in order to provide what it is that they need and want in a solution form, and you'll be able to profit accordingly and possibly even maximize your profit and your margins accordingly because it is a unique solution. So if we move on to the next slide. So let me give you some practical examples of this. So let's take, for example, the brand Black & Decker. Now, Black & Decker as an organization referred to themselves as being in the power tool game. They were power tool manufacturers. Now, just that word manufacturer alone says to you that we focused on our product. And they may be really good products. They've got phenomenal drills. They, incredibly powerful. They're getting lighter. They bringing all sorts of dynamics into it. But at the end of the day, if they're focused on being a power tool manufacturer, what they're going to develop and emphasize in their strategic growth is putting a lot of investment and capex into creating better products. But at the end of the day, the question is, do people actually want to ever buy a drill? And I can tell you right now that the answer is no. People don't love the streamlined, silky nature of a drill and therefore desperately want to buy a drill. It's a means to an end. And what is the end? The end is a hole in the wall. And so if the hole in the wall is the solution, how quickly could somebody adapt something that looks like a laser, looks like a pen, and it's a laser? It's got a little diameter and a depth gauge on the side, and all you do is you tweak that, you hold it against the wall, you press a little button, and it pushes a hole into the wall, and you just pop that back into your pocket and walk away. Why would you ever want to buy a drill again? So if you've developed your whole business around manufacturing power tools, or drills in this case, you're going to go out of business tomorrow if somebody comes up with an invention like that. That's not keeping up with the solution. That's focusing on your product. Two that I've been directly involved with myself is Rainbow Chickens. Most of you will know, we referred to what was referred to as a chicken producer, and some of us got rather clever and said, well, actually maybe we're a poultry producer, which then allowed us to go into other areas of poultry. But quite frankly, when we did shopper research, we found out that people didn't buy chicken because they wanted chicken, which horrified us a bit. But the truth of the matter is that people wanted meal solutions. They wanted a solution to their kids' lunches, to having a dinner on the table that was healthy, nutritious, and convenient to put together. And so at the end of the day, if we were focused on being poultry producers, we were going to produce the best kind of poultry that you could possibly produce, which is fine. But at the end of the day, people are looking at various other things as solutions to their meal needs. And therefore, they're going to shift and change and use other things as well. And so ultimately, the decision here, strategic decision, was that we're now in the meal solutions business, and therefore we need to change the business model and bring on other brands and provide solutions to people beyond merely poultry or chicken. And the same goes for Kimberly-Clark. Many would know that brands such as Kleenex and Huggies and Kotex and Baby Soft and things like that. The company on a global scale was known as a tissue manufacturer, referred to within the organization as a tissue manufacturer. And over time, what we actually showed was that people don't buy toilet paper because they really love it. They buy it because it's a means to an end, I'm sorry to say. And so at the end of the day, as a wiping and drying solutions business, you're staying in touch with the latest technologies that will provide the best possible solutions to your customers. So what we need to do now is we need to get our sales team's minds right. And the important thing here is that they start to focus on the prospect's truth, not the fact that they're wanting to try and close a deal. And it's a very difficult mind shift to make for salespeople who've only been taught that the way that you're going to be incentivized is on the deals that you close. And sure, at the end of the day, that is what is important. But it's the road to getting there that makes that either a rocky road or a dead end. And the way to change that is allowing trust to develop with the people that they're speaking to. Start to engage with them in conversation and don't just assume that what it is that you've provided or that you're going to give them is the best possible fit to their problem or issue. You've got to start by listening. And I say listen, listen, listen. Because typically salespeople traditionally are people with a gift of the gab, people who like people who get on with people who like to talk. And that is no longer the kind of salesperson that you really want in your organization. And I'll talk more to details of people just now. So it's really important that people that you hire in those types of roles, or you develop and educate and coach to be better in those roles, have the ability to really listen. They don't go in there with preconceived ideas. They stay in the moment. They're focused on the conversation, and they truly are listening to what's being said to them. And the questioning that they use is obviously really important as well. So avoid at all costs that sales closure pressure, because if that is sitting on your shoulders as a salesperson, that's what's going on in your head whilst the person's talking to you and telling you about their needs and wants. Next slide. So here I'm talking about changing the approach and changing your tone in order to provide solutions. And you can't provide solutions unless you actually have started to listen to what it is exactly that they need or what their challenges are. Don't have rigid scripts that salespeople need to follow to go through in order to get to the point of converting and closing the deal. It's really important now more than ever, and understanding that people have come through periods of degree of turmoil over this last 3 months in particular, whether it's personally having been ill, or the fact that suddenly their business is in a state of strife. You're going to have to show empathy and sensitivity, and it's got to be genuine. It can't be something that you're pretending to put across. People can see through that. And so the focus is now more than ever on the customer, moving from that traditional sales goal of making the sale, now replacing that to discover the reality of your customer's client, your potential client's situation. Stay in the present, as I said before, listening, or else they suspect that you're purely interested in trying to push a sale. And if people suspect that, they lose faith and they lose trust in you. Also, the important thing is that when people put up certain barriers or hurdles, if you like, or ask you tough questions, there is a tendency sometimes to become defensive. And it's really important that that's not the case. If you become defensive, again, you're showing that distrust that's going to come through in the way that they perceive you. And the end game chasing needs to stop. Those false expectations will ultimately lead to rejection and disappointment. And finally, the self-esteem of your sales force will go down. And I can assure you that sales is going to be more difficult in the coming months and the coming year than it ever was before. Remember that people buy from people. And so humility needs to take over from overconfidence. The type of gift of the gab type salesperson I spoke about earlier now needs to be more and genuinely showing humility. Remember, the sale is lost at the beginning, not at the end of the deal. People already have made up their mind, even though they patiently sit there so that they're not perceived to be rude. They might not end the conversation, after a few minutes, but they have ended the conversation in their own minds. And remember, people generally are quite suspicious of salespeople. They expect that salespeople are only really interested in their own agenda, which traditionally is very true. And that's why this whole sales approach needs to change. But understand as well that that trust needs to be earned. And the only way to earn that trust is for people to really trust you and believe in your empathy and humility right in the beginning. So humanize the sales process. And remember that your prospects are actually people, and despite the fact we may use the term prospect in a sales sense behind the scenes, we're not talking about them as objects. They need to be seen as people, and people are the ones that make decisions at the end of the day. You need to problem solve as opposed to going there with preconceived solutions. Even if you think now, well, we're not going to them with products, we're going to them with solutions. Don't go to them with solutions. Find out what solutions you need to go away and come back with later. And again, be aware of that linear approach sales model that I spoke of, where you have steps that salespeople need to follow. And most professional selling skills courses will teach salespeople to do that. You've got to get away from that, but you've got to have people that are confident enough to be able to go with the flow and slowly lead things in a direction, but through listening. And then, of course, language is critical. You know, the words and phrases that you need to use in that conversation that will evoke a different type of behavior. And the kind of language here would need to be natural, conversational, calm, you know, relaxed, gentle, respectful, polite, and gracious. Does that sound like a traditional salesperson to you? Most likely not. And that's part of the challenge. You know, the kind of tone going forward needs to be low-key, humble, unassuming. Authenticity is absolutely critical. You can't pretend to be all of these things. Attentive and listening all the time, friendly, and ultimately the process of being helpful. Some of these things may not immediately turn into a sale, but if the trust is there, then there's a good chance that that sale will come down the line, assuming, of course, it's the right client. So one of the important things that I spend quite a lot of time on with my clients in coaching is understanding their own personal leadership style and approach to how they lead their teams, and understanding how to deal with their teams accordingly. And traditionally, well, let me first explain. So the DISC profiling, DISC, is a profile system that I use, and I believe it is incredibly useful in many different ways, and I'll show you how it's useful in the sales process. So the D stands for dominance, and this is talking about different types of personality types. It can be in leadership, but it can also just be, you know, your family at home. And you can start to get an idea of the kind of people that I'm describing here. So if you look at the diagram on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the 4 different quadrants, and the D is the first one, and that's dominance. And that's a person with quite a domineering personality, somebody who's very results-oriented, they're driven, they're very competitive in what they do, they make decisions very quickly, they're not very empathetic generally with people. And here I'm describing a typical entrepreneur in many instances, somebody who, quite frankly, just gets on with it. And that's where entrepreneurs are often very successful and often also very unsuccessful. Then you've got I, and the I is the influencing personality. And here you've got somebody who's generally persuasive, who's inspiring, who's enthusiastic, energetic, etc. And this is typically the kind of person that one would hire in the past as being a good sales fit for the organization. Then you've got, again, on the people-oriented side of things, the S, which is the stable individual. And stabilized individuals typically are, you know, looking at amiable situations. They're quite democratic in their approach. They're very patient. They tend to listen. And those sorts of people we tend to find in organizations make really great CEOs and MDs. And more than ever before, now, better salespeople. So salespeople need to fit somewhere in between the I and the S, but more so into the S than ever before. And then you've got the C, which is more the sort of cautious or compliant type of individual, where they tend to be very analytical, detail-oriented, systematic. Here we're talking about people that become accountants or work in administration, you know, even things like certain engineering faculties, etc. They very often task-oriented as opposed to people-oriented, more reserved, and therefore, you know, very different people to approach. So now, if you can understand these different personality types, it's important that your salespeople are trained to start to look out for certain personality types right up front, but also to understand their own personality type so that they don't go in with a bombastic type of approach to somebody who's very cautious, or that they don't go in too slowly, and patiently with somebody who is a high dominant entrepreneur, results oriented, I don't have much time, get to the point, please. So the important thing here is to use these personality traits and styles to adapt these to influence the way that your salespeople read the situation very professionally, and know who they're talking to and how to approach them accordingly. Next slide. Must be all the rain in Cape Town that's leading to a slight delay in the slide changing process. Anyway, I'll move on. But ultimately, this is all about relationship building. And, you don't want to sell to people, you want to help people. And if you can help people and they can see that you are truly helping them, then ultimately there'll be trust going forward. Be willing to give the customers more than they expect. And now more than ever before, that whole adage of under promise and over deliver is absolutely critical. And it's essential that the focus is on delighting customers for long-term relationships, because at the end of the day, you want referrals. And if you're going to get referrals, you're going to get referrals from people that truly trust you. And the best type of marketing to have is referral, because it's coming from a place of complete neutrality, people who obviously have bought into what it is that you have, and that they in turn are talking others, influencing others to come in your direction. Then the relationships, more than ever before, are the things that are critical, and the bond that you build during a crisis and a period like Corona is obviously going to give you huge dividends down the line, if they perceive that you're in it for the long term as opposed to purely in it to make a quick buck. The way customers feel ultimately about having purchased from you is absolutely essential, and so you don't want them to struggle through believing that they've been coerced into something that they don't really want. Don't treat your customers as numbers. Build a relationship and loyalty. And obviously the best customers at the end of the day are the people who ultimately will stick around once the crisis has ended. The long-term customers are the most important people to hold on to and to impress throughout. Okay, so it appears that we might have lost communication with the mothership. So I'm just holding on for a couple of seconds. If you just bear with me for a bit. Sorry about this. All right, it looks like we have a few technical issues. So now I'm really going to talk about the people that you need to be looking for in your organization. And Lee Iacocca said, start with good people, lay out the rules, communicate with your employees, motivate them and reward them. If you do all those things effectively, you can't miss. Lee Iacocca was a particularly famous marketer and strategist through the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s. And I think that really succinctly puts it in a nutshell. The important thing with people is that you don't just simply fill holes, that you sorry guys, there seems to be a problem with the connection somewhere along the line, but it seems that we're back on. So yeah, the important thing here is not to fill holes. Where you've got people who are where you've got gaps in your organization, don't simply fill that as a temporary hole. Look for people ultimately in your organization that have the potential for growth. Look for people who have the potential to move one or two levels above that you're employing them to fill. And if you're simply filling a hole, as your business starts to evolve and grow, you're going to find that those people have an inability to grow with the organization, which gives you all sorts of challenges going down the line. You need to move from the whole focus and emphasis in sales of fear building around closing sales to getting them to focus more and remain positive through what is really quite a tricky period. You need to set new standards, and those new standards mean that you're going to need to raise their game by emphasizing a very different approach to sales. The way that you have typically rewarded salespeople in the past is something that now needs to change and needs to adapt to this new approach. You need to change from a revenue to a profit focus, and very often organizations are afraid to do that because they're afraid to give away information on the profitability of the organization. And quite frankly, if you're going to trust your people, if you're not going to trust them, they're not going to instill trust in the prospective market either. And so it is really, really important that you do focus on measuring them on profit. And remember, it's not percentage profit. You don't bank percentages, you bank rands. And quite frankly, if you're just emphasizing revenue, you then run the risk of discounting and making a sale in order to make a sale. So the focus has to be on long-term profit, and that needs to be built into their KPIs. So you need to have professional job descriptions and KPIs so that they know exactly what's required of them objectively, and you can get the best of the productivity out of them, and keep training and make sure that you're developing these people ongoing. Next slide. Okay, so now more than ever, it's time to change the way that you do things. you can see that it's sort of blinding flashes of the obvious in some respects. It's not to say that you're walking away from the sale, which is really important at the end of the day. The important thing is the journey that you take and the approach that you take your prospective customer through in order to get to that final point of clinching the deal. Can move on now. Sorry, there's quite a delay on. Maybe it's all the rain in Cape Town that's suddenly come into play here. But just to finish up, I just wanted to suggest a couple of things that you can take away from today's session. The first is, if there's nothing else that you do beyond today, take pen and paper and go and list 5 ideas that you need to take action on in order to improve your sales. So just jot it down after this webinar. 5 things that you need to take action on in order to improve your sales, and develop a new business plan with new sales strategies accordingly, because ultimately your business plan is going to need to be different. And I'm also, for those that are interested, prepared to make myself available to, completely complimentary, just for this BDO webinar series. For those of you who want to get in touch and have a 1-hour coaching session, whether it's around sales, around leadership, around marketing, around business growth, etc. It doesn't matter. But if you want to use the opportunity as a sounding board, please do so, and my contact details will come up shortly. And I'm down along the way, but if there are some questions, I can hand over to Justine now to read some of those out.
We have no questions for now. If you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section. We'll just give it a minute for those to come through.
That's fine. Thanks, Justine. Will you just pop the last slide on, then they can, if they don't want to ask the questions directly now, of course, they're very, very welcome to do so in their own time and via WhatsApp or via email. Okay, well, maybe we should just wrap up here, and then people can use the opportunity to contact us in their own time. And I know a lot of people have very personal questions that they might not necessarily want to raise on a platform such as this. But thank you very much for your time, and again, apologies for the breakdown. Hopefully we can sort that out for next time.
Right, thanks everyone for joining us, and I would just like to remind you that today's webinar was a third in a series of 5, and we would like to invite you to join us the next 2 weeks. On Wednesday the 17th, Greg will be talking about simple strategic planning and strategy implementation, and on Tuesday the 23rd, he'll be talking about the gentle art of delegation. I think without any questions, we finished nicely on time. I wish you the best for the rest of the week, and have a good weekend. Thank you very much.